Hey everyone, DisturbedShadow here, back to conclude my Avenged Sevenfold discography by talking about their most recently released album, which was released 2 years ago, back in 2013, which is of course their sixth album entitled "Hail to the King," which, as you may know, is sort of a album that a lot of people like to bash back when it came out, and they still like to bash it. But I think that there's a lot of good stuff on this album, and it's definitely worth talking about. So, or it's definitely worth listening to, is what I meant to say. So anyway, just a little bit of background. Before the album's release, sort of M Shadow sort of said that it was going to be an album they're sort of paying tribute to the roots of metal, going back to some of the bands that influenced them, and trying to incorporate some of that kind of style into the music for more classic heavy metal style album, bringing in influences from bands like Metallica, Black Sabbath, and Iron Maiden, that kind of stuff. The kind of bands that sort of influenced the band and helped influenced them when they were first starting out, and that continued to influence them to this day. But when the album came out, a lot of people said that they're trying too hard to sound like the bands that they're paying tribute to, or they're ripping them off even, which I think is an unfair criticism, because while it is still definitely heavily, you can definitely hear influences from some of those bands in this music. It's still very much a Avenged Sevenfold album, and it blends in their signature style perfectly into these influences to create a combination of modern metal and the old school classic stuff. And I don't get why people hate this album as much as they do, because I think it's a very, very solid release. And I think that people should just listen to it for what it is, and not trying to say, oh, it sounds like this band, and it doesn't sound like Avenged Sevenfold, or this band sucks, and they're just trying to rip off these artists, which is exactly not what they're trying to do. They're trying to pay tribute to the artists that influenced them, and incorporate some of their sort of signature sounds into their own signature sound to create something new. And I don't get why people don't get that, and they should just take it for what it is and listen to it. It's a pretty solid album. So anyway, I'm not going to rant about this forever, so let's just jump in and talk about some of the cool tracks on this album that are definitely worth listening to, which in my opinion is almost every track on this album, because this album is just really tight and focused, and it just comes together really nicely. Anyway, let's jump into some of the tracks now. So we'll start off with the opening track. I said this in the last few reviews, but Avenged Sevenfold always makes an amazing intro track. The last few albums I've done it. They did it with Beast and the Harlot on City of Evil, with Critical Acclaim on the self-titled album, and with Nightmare on Nightmare. And again, they do it again with Shepherd of Fire on Hail to the King. It's just a really awesome intro track. It sort of starts off with this bell sound and sort of rain and fire. And it's sort of reminiscent of the opening track to Black Sabbath's debut album entitled Black Sabbath, which sort of had that sort of dark, evil start to it. And then it sort of comes in with this guitar riff that keeps repeating throughout the whole song. It's just this really groovy guitar riff, and the bass comes in. It's just this really simple but really heavy, chuggy bass line. It just has so much groove to it. And then the drums come in, it just has this really great groove to it. It's just this really catchy riff, and it just gets stuck in your head all the time. And the vocals on this album are really solid. It's just really great stuff in the verses, and then it just gets really amazing in the chorus, where M Shadow's voice just sort of soars above everything. And another song that has a solid melodic guitar solo in it as well. And I've read this in an interview that they sort of went into the song trying to get to have the song defined by this one riff that is just constant throughout the whole album. It's just, through the whole song, it just has this really great groove to it. They sort of structured the song around that, and it really was very well executed, and it just has a really great sound to it. Track number 2, the title track, Hail to the King, which was the first song they released off this album. They released it as a single ahead of time, sort of introduce people to the album before it came out. This is another song with a really great feel to it. It's got this just constant melodic guitar bit throughout the entire song. It never stops, not even once, and it sort of flows in and out of the guitar solo. It's just really well put together. And then behind that, there's a really simplistic rhythm riff, and the drums and the bass as well, to sort of put the focus on that guitar part that's constantly going, that lead guitar part that just keeps going throughout the whole song. And it's just a really great combination of sound, this sort of put the focus on just that melodic guitar bit and then have everything else take a backseat to that. And then, of course, Hilaire and M. Shadow's amazing vocals on top of that to just come together for a really nice and very interesting song. Track number 3, Doing Time, which is a song that feels very, very Guns N' Roses influence. And that's not a bad thing. It's got a really great feel to it. It's basically a song, I can best describe it as Guns N' Roses meets Avenged Sevenfold. It has this really great, fun feel to it. And I saw them perform it live, and just a really fun live song. It's the shortest track on the album with only 3.5 minutes long. It's just really just a fun song with some really great vocals and some great guitar parts and everything. It just comes together really nicely for a very fun, enjoyable song. Track number 4, This Means War, which is a song everyone likes to call Sad But True, which is a Metallica song, if you didn't know. But I don't think that's a fair comparison. Yes, this song feels very Metallica Black Album era influenced, but the song is very different from Sad But True. And a lot of people say, oh, it's the exact same riff. It is not the exact same riff. It is a very different riff. There's a little bit of similarity, but other than that, it's a completely different guitar riff. And they bring in these harmonized lead parts in it as well that is not present in the Metallica song, Sad But True. So I don't think the comparison really has that much grounds. I guess it's a little bit similar, but to say it's the exact same song is just stupid. And what the fuck are you talking about? It's a good song, too. It's just got a really great groove to it with this really heavy drum line going on, and then this really groovy riff worked in there, and then great layering in of melodic guitar bits, and then M. Shadows, again, really stands out on vocals. There's these really soaring build-ups to the chorus, and as he's just belting out This Means War in the chorus, it's just a really great feel to it. Track number 5, Requiem, which is another really interesting song. It sort of has this whole apocalyptic feel to it. It starts off with this choir singing in Latin, and it gets really heavy on all the instruments, and just really wants to grind all this heaviness into your face. And then M. Shadows comes in with the vocals and just really dark lyrics. It just has a really great feel to it, and the way they blend in the choir into the entire song just has a great feel to it. Anyway, those 5 tracks are the first half of the album, which, when I saw them on the Hail to the King tour, they played them in that order, laced throughout the rest of the set list. But I think that it's a really heavy, really great way to start off the first half of the album. But now we move on to the second half of the album, which is also loaded with really good songs, which maybe don't get as much credit as the first 5, because those are sort of where all the singles are in. So the ones they started off playing live. But anyway, starting with track number 6, Crimson Day, which is one of the ballads of this album, which is placed right after the Requiem, which is probably one of the heaviest tracks on the album. It's just a really great, simple melodic song with clean guitars and simplistic rhythm riffs and this really soaring melodic lead parts. And this is a song that is really focused on the vocals, and M. Shadows really stands out doing it more soft melodic singing, and then the more singing anthemic type, or soaring anthemic singing in the parts of the bridge and stuff like that. And this song is actually, I believe it's written about the birth of one of his sons. It's sort of interesting, close to the heart type of a song for him. And it's a really great song overall. Track number 7, Heretic, which just has a really catchy, groovy riff to it. It sort of has that signature evil Avenged Sevenfold sound to it that is present in songs on stuff from off of Nightmare and off of Waking the Fallen, where it's, the riff itself can best be described as just that evil tone to it. And it's just got a really fun, great feel to it. It's got that signature dual lead sound that they have. It just comes off really nicely. Track number 8, Coming Home, which is a personal favorite of mine off this album. I think it's the best track on the second half of the album, and at least in my top 5 off the entire album. It just has a really great feel to it. It feels kind of Iron Maiden influenced a bit, and just some of the guitar stuff happening here, and just the way it progresses. I don't know, it kind of reminds me of Iron Maiden a bit. There's a really great melodic guitar playing throughout the whole song, and just as always on this album, Avenged Sevenfold just comes together so nicely with the guitars and the drums and the bass, and then M. Shadow's voice just completes the picture. It just really soars on this track. And an interesting thing about this track is the closing guitar solo is actually performed by Synyster Gates' dad, Brian Hayner Sr., who has performed on some tracks on the previous albums, as I mentioned in those reviews. So it's cool to see him back again to perform that guest solo there. And then the drumming on the end of the song is one of the stand-up moments for Arin, who's new to the band, which I meant to mention earlier. And he sort of come in to replace the Rev finally as their permanent member. And this track, at the end of this track, is a sort of a standout drumming bit that really shows that he's doing some technical stuff there. It's just that caught my interest there. Track number 9, Planets, which is another heavy song, which, jumping right off the drums I was just talking about, there's some, this is one of the moments where there's a really large amount of double bassing happening. It's just really great, heavy in-your-face feel. And this song just has these big, crushing riffs, and this M-Shadow is just belting out these really dark, apocalyptic lyrics, and it just comes together so nicely. It's a really powerful song. And there's a lot of cool symphonic elements laced into the song as well. And finally, track number 10, Acid Rain, which is the closing track, which is a very interesting choice for a closing track, since it's mostly just the drums and then a lot of symphonic elements and piano and just a little bit of lead guitar playing in various parts in the intro and the outro, and as well as the guitar solo. Sort of an interesting choice for an ending song. It's another ballady type thing with M-Shadows really shining on these sort of more soft, melodic type of singing. And then it blends nicely with the piano and the cello and all that other stuff to produce a very interesting song. And it's a very cool way to end this album. Anyway, I've talked about all the tracks now, so let's jump in and talk about the band members themselves. First up, we'll talk about Arin on the drums, as he joined in somewhere during the touring for Nightmare, I believe it was, right when they did their Nightmare Before Christmas tour, or Nightmare After Christmas tour. Sorry. Anyway, that was the first time I saw them perform live, so I didn't get the chance to see him with the Rev. But anyway, I saw him come in. He did a really good job with them live, and then of course we finally get to hear him play a full album with the band, as he'd done a couple of the songs they did for the Call of Duty franchise. But this is the first time he played on a full album, and so I thought it would be cool to just sort of go a little bit in depth in what he's adding to this band. So the main thing about this album is that the drumming is pulled back and simplistic because it needs to fit with the sort of old school metal vibe they're going for. But Arin does a very good job of pulling that off. And there are still some moments, like on Planets and Coming Home, and a couple other songs where the drumming really stands out, and he's sort of doing this technical kind of stuff that shows that he can still do that crazy wild stuff that the Rev was known for. And he can play this more simplistic pullback style, which fits in with the sort of style of sound they're going for on this album as a complete work. Anyway, he's doing a great job, and I think he's a great addition to the band and a good replacement for the Rev. Zacky Vengeance and Synyster Gates on guitar. There's a lot of crazy, awesome, really groovy guitar riffs throughout this album, like on Shepherd of Fire, Doing Time, This Means War, Requiem, Coming Home. There's these standout riffs that just get stuck in your head, and there's really great vibe to them. And then there's a lot of amazing solos. Some of their other last few albums didn't really put as much emphasis on guitar solos, but almost every track on this album has a really awesome guitar solo. Like on Hail to the King, Shepherd of Fire, even Doing Time has a great short but awesome solo. And of course, Coming Home with like 3 different guitar solos that have a really great sound to them. There's all these great dual lead parts throughout the whole album. It's just so much great guitar playing on this album. Johnny Christ on bass. There's a lot of, or pretty much throughout the entire album, you can hear his bass. It's loud, turned up nice and loud in the mix, like I always like to hear. And he's always doing some stuff that's diverting from what the guitars are doing. Like on Shepherd of Fire, it's just this simple but always thumping bass line that just goes throughout the whole song. And then on stuff like Acid Rain, where it's not as much guitar, you can sort of hear him on the bass a lot more. And then stuff like Requiem with really heavy bass lines as well. So he's doing all this cool, interesting, heavy, very heavy bass stuff. It just fits in nicely with the style that they're sort of going for on this album. And finally, M Shadow's on vocals. I've been saying it throughout the entire review, but M Shadow's vocals just really stand out on this album. Just soaring constantly. Songs like Shepherd of Fire and Hail to the King and This Means War, where it really shows off his vocal chops, and he's doing an amazing job, and he's one of my favorite metal singers, and just has a really great, unique sound, and he's got really powerful vocal cords. Anyway, that wraps up my review of the band members. Finally, we'll just do one last sort of final thoughts thing. As I mentioned earlier at the beginning of this review, that I think it's a very solid album, and you shouldn't say that it's just them ripping off other bands, because that's not what they're doing. They're paying tribute to them and also blending in their own style throughout the entire album to create something new and different. So I don't think you should criticize it for trying to rip off other bands. But if you don't like it, that's okay, because it's not for everyone. But just don't bash it for no good reason, because that's never a cool thing to do, even if it's like something completely different that you wouldn't listen for. Like, I don't like any sort of pop, but like I don't go out of my way to bash it. I just don't listen to it. So that's what you should do. If you don't like it, don't listen to it. Anyway, I don't want to rant again, so just as I was saying earlier, it's a very tight and very focused album. They went into this album like, we're going to make this hard rock, old school heavy metal album, and that's what they did. Every song is true to that vision, and it's a very tight sound, very focused. Every song, like I said, every song really fits in with that style, which sort of puts it above some of the other stuff they were. Like on the self-titled album, even Nightmare to Extend, they sort of went off and did whatever the hell they wanted to do. They sort of, oh, let's make this cool song, or let's blend in some country elements here, or we'll do this crazy Little Piece of Heaven song, or whatever. There's all these different styles all over the place, and they made some really great songs with that. But as an overall album, it did sort of lack focus. But this album, every song sort of has a really strong direction. Like, we're going to make this old school sound on every track. It's just, it comes together really nicely for a very tight, very focused album, like I keep saying. And that is why I place it so high. I say that it's my personal third favorite album from Avenged Sevenfold, just behind Waking the Fallen and City of Evil, respectively, which those two are my personal favorite albums from them. They're the two that got me into this band. And they're just very awesome albums. But this album's right up there with those ones. It's very close third place. And that's sort of why I hold it so high, or hold it in such high regard, compared to a lot of other people who sort of blow it off as sort of ripping off other bands and stuff like that. But I don't think that's fair, because it's a very tight and focused album. Anyway, I don't want to keep repeating myself here, so I'm going to wrap it up here. This is a very good album. You should definitely check it out if you're a fan of this band or a fan of any sort of metal. It's definitely worth checking out. But if you're not a fan of Avenged Sevenfold, maybe pass it, because it's sort of not the sort of music you want to listen to. Anyway, I've been DisturbedShadow reviewing another album. And if you enjoyed watching this, be sure to like the video and subscribe if you want to see more of my reviews. I try to put them out weekly, but sometimes I do more or less than that, depending on how busy I am. Anyway, that wraps up the review, and I will see you guys in the next video.